how we appeared here was we basically met Russell at Wisdom 2.0 a little bit earlier this year at the conference, and we started talking about Holacracy, and he said it'd be great to come over and do a presentation, as you are, voracious learners and want to know about everything that's new in the marketplace. What I wanted to do is start off with a really quick clip, a video, to get a sense of some of the dynamics at play that we will talk about a little bit more as we go through the presentation. And so I'll take one moment and clip over here. And what I want you to do is, as you're watching this particular video, just have a sense of how does this relate to us at Inflection? How does this relate to how we work together? And what do you notice? So that's okay. Alrighty. We'll let the ducks go to sleep there. So what are your thoughts? What were some of your experiences and thoughts as you were watching that?
How did that relate to a Monday meeting? Were you that much in sync?
Yeah.
It seemed like there was no leader and everybody was just kind of, everyone was gauging where they were going based on proximity to everybody else. And nobody got too far away before they came back,
Yeah.
To the norm or the group.
Yeah, absolutely. There was definitely no leader calling the shots saying, go left, turn right. I think we need to go up a little bit. Any other thoughts that popped up as you were watching that?
It was just very organic.
Yeah.
There was no structure to it, but it flowed very well. It was very graceful.
Yeah, graceful, organic, flow, all really essential components for when you're going to, as you're working together in business. When I think about, also as I just watch them, not necessarily even tuning into what their specific purpose is at that time, but the word purpose comes up. Like, what are we all here for? What is it that we're trying to achieve? And why have we come together collectively to, what is the work that we've come together collectively to do in the world? So have any of you read the book by Daniel Pink, Drive? Yeah. And as I think about that, it talks about autonomy, it talks about mastery, and it talks about purpose. And these to me feel like such essential components of really, of why we work. What is it that we're doing? Purpose, what meaning it has. Autonomy, the question of how much power do you actually have? What decisions can you make? do you have autonomy? What levels of that within your roles? And then mastery, which is, I think, really centrally important to any business, but specifically when you think about, one of your values being excellence, you're really masters of your domains. And mastery being how many hours are you specifically focused on the work that you do so that you can really take what is a strength to that level of what I would even call genius, where you know that you are really phenomenal at something. So we're going to talk a little bit about those as an underbelly. How does Holacracy really support those? But when you think about what are some of the things that get in the way of you really delivering on your purpose? So as you see some of the things that are popping up on the screen there, these are endemic challenges with any organization. It doesn't mean you have all of them. You might only have one or two. And so what we're talking about as we're talking to you guys in Inflection is about how do we take what you're doing to the next level? Because we know that you're really successful, but are there any of these that are impacting you, your team, or the organization so that we can really, kind of up level to that next ability? When we think about the endemic challenges, often people think that they are problems to solve. And as I think about a problem to solve, it would be more like, am I going to go to Napa this weekend or Half Moon Bay? It's more of an either or. You've got this decision, are we going to paint the walls green or blue? They're either or decisions. And so that's what I see as a problem to solve. But when you think about some of the other challenges, talking about whether it's collaboration and autonomy, or whether it's centralized decision-making and decentralized decision-making, these are more polarities. They're interdependent pairs. If we think about, say, candor and diplomacy, these are interdependent pairs that we want to leverage the upside of both. We don't want to just do one of them. So let's have a quick look at a few examples. So two of your values, excellence and speed. If you're only about excellence, you might not be able to get the product to market fast enough. So you've got to have speed that's holding excellence in dynamic tension. So this is a perfect example of really the genius of and. How do you do both? Structure and flexibility. Structured, what are we doing? Okay, this is how we're going to do it. But you've got to be flexible. There's an important meeting that needs to happen. We've got to be flexible and make great decisions to say, let's just roll. Another one, continuity and transformation. When I think about, there are all sorts of things that you are doing brilliantly, and you want to maintain and enhance those. You don't want to throw those out. They are what you want continuity with. However, you want transformation as well. You want to really say, okay, what is it? What do we need to transform to really up level to that next stage of our organization? So here's a list of a number of different polarities. I'm not asking you to, take that in. You get the general idea. How do you leverage these interdependent pairs? But what I would like to do is to get you to just, whether it's at your tables, you could be in 2s or 4s, whatever structurally makes sense, so you don't have to do a lot of movement because you've got your lunches. I want you to look at what of these polarities or these values or behaviors do you think that you individually, apologize about that. Do you individually or your team or the organization as a whole overemphasize one or the other? So I'm thinking about, so I'll pull it back up to the list. So we're looking at, for you individually, for maybe your group or team or the whole organization, are there any of these or any of the other polarities we talked about that you feel like there might be either an overemphasis or an underemphasis? And I think that one of the things that, another talk for another day, but it's really looking at what are those early warning signs? Like, what would an early warning sign be that you've overemphasized individual? Or what would be an early warning sign that you've overemphasized collaboration? So looking at that from those lenses and then building what would be action steps. But what would be an early warning sign that you might think just about individual and collaboration as you think about that polarity? Yeah, absolutely, totally. And so you're looking at, with collaboration, some brainstorming activity that you can call upon, that you can really get the ideas in. And then you might go to the individual to actually kind of distill those ideas and go, oh, this one makes total sense. I've now heard the spectrum. So that could be a way that was used. Okay. When I think about holacracy, what I see it does is it actually really supports you to be able to leverage those polarities. It supports both ends of the spectrum. It supports what I would call both preferences. Because quite often when you think about polarities, you think about what's my preference? Do I prefer working on my own the majority of the time with a little bit of collaboration? Or do I prefer much more being collaborative most of the time with a little bit of working on my own? And people will fall at different places within all of these preferences. And what happens often in an organization is we start to overemphasize specific people's preferences. Who do we normally overemphasize their preferences? See a few smiles and yeah, we normally overemphasize whoever the leaders are. Because if I'm the leader, it's okay, I'm going to swing back to you. But, but over time, because you actually are a high-performing organization, you've actually had a lot of interaction, and therefore you're going to be able to really focus on both sides of the polarity. However, at different stages, different people will overemphasize, and how do we make sure that we keep that continual balance in play? Or rather, leverage both the upsides. So as I think about holacracy, we'll go through some of these and break out what really is holacracy and how does it leverage polarities to actually make you more successful and deliver on your purpose. We're actually going to look at it, we're going to explore it through, we're going to talk a little bit about sensing, then tensions, processing tensions, mastery and genius, we'll talk a little bit more about that. We'll talk about some of the media headlines like no managers, the no managers in holacracy, which is kind of one of the things that gets shared. And then we'll talk a bit about metrics that matter at the end. So when I think about sensing, the reason why sensing is such a critical skill is how do you iterate forward your company if you haven't got everyone being a sensor? So what we're looking at here is how can we get everybody to effectively sense and then be able to rapidly and reliably take all that knowledge and information and transform it into meaningful change. So that's one of the underpinnings is holacracy is saying how do we get those voices in the mix? With sensing, you've got sensing from your head, you've got sensing from your heart, your gut, and your whole body. So we're looking at how do you bring all of that sensing ability to the table. We talk about tensions because what we're sensing is basically the gap between what is current reality and what could be a future potential. So you're sensing a gap, and that gap could be a positive. It could be, I haven't delivered an appreciation to somebody. So there's a gap between current reality, me having this thought, and having delivered it so that somebody else knows what that appreciation is, so that they can utilize that in whatever way, shape, or form they do. Meaning, they might go, oh wow, I can see I'm really good at this thing. Maybe I should put more attention on this skill, and now that's going to bring more value to the organization and to me. So that gap is not always a negative. It's a challenge, it's an issue, it's a problem, it's a potential. These are all what I would call a tension. When I think about the power of having an engine in your organization so that you can effectively get everyone's tensions processed in a rapid way and into meaningful change, there needs to be some kind of systemized way. Because if you think about most organizations, they don't get excited about, oh, how many tensions have we raised today? You know, but that's what basically in Holacracy you're doing, is you're saying, okay, let's really effectively sense what's going on so we can actually process that tension to make us even more talented and more impactful to the wider community than we are even at this point. So the way we actually process tensions, I talked about you've got to have a system. So what Holacracy does is it separates operations, like all your tactical stuff, from governance, which is all of your decision-making stuff. Meaning in tactical, you're talking about what are the projects, what are the action steps we're talking about. And in governance, you're looking at, well, who gets to make that decision? How do I change that decision? What policy do we need here? So these are all the conversations in governance. And in most organizations, we keep governance and operations together, whereas this is distinctly saying, let's have a meeting to actually process the work, and let's have a separate meeting to actually say who needs to do what, and how do we, what I would call, have mini reorgs on a regular basis. Not disruptive reorgs, but how do we actually bring all of your knowledge, all of your sensing, all of your tensions to the mix to actually iterate the organization forward in the most effective way. So I'm not going to go through the meeting processes. You know, that could be a lunch and learn for another day, doing a simulation or something where you get to experience it. But basically, there's a structured format with the tactical meeting. To me, the operations and the tactical meeting process isn't some radical departure. It's just basically systematizing it. And the piece I would underline is that in this, in the agenda building part of the meeting, it's really looking at anybody on the fly can bring up any tension. So I think that's the only component, or it's the specific component I would underline in this moment, is to say that instead of an agenda being set by, you know, X number of people, that anyone can add tensions that therefore will get processed that day. So I think that to me is a critical component of getting tensions processed. When I think about governance, kind of flipping over into the other types of meetings, it's really answering all of these questions. And so on the face of it, I would initially think, my brain would capture, you mean we've got to have 2 meetings? You know, that would be a question that would pop up for me. So what I'm going to do is go through really what is the thought pattern behind that and what's the power and the impact of that. So with governance, I talked about its mini reorg. You're looking at, right now you have, maybe you have, or you've got some level of org chart that's there with your job descriptions, you know, so you know what you're doing. And often the day that those are created, something happens in the organization and they become out of date. They become old and they're kind of sitting in a drawer. So we're looking at 3 different types of structure. What's the formal one you've got going on? What is the one that actually wants to happen? You know, there's an emergent structure that wants to happen. And sorry, and there's the actual one that is happening. So you've got these 3, and what Holacracy through the mini reorgs does is it smushes these 3 into one, that you are continually operating from the one that is happening and the one that wants to happen. And there's this truing up again and again each and every month. And instead of it being, you know, again, a few select people who are designing from mind, you now are engaging the entire workforce to start looking at this issue of how do we actually make sure that we are being most effective and efficient. So again, we've got a meeting process, and I'll come back to this part of it, the IDM process here, of looking at how do I, because within that process, I would actually be making suggestions about how to change my role. I might be making suggestions on how to evolve another role that I interact with. Or I might be suggesting a whole new role that is missing that we actually need to have added to the mix. So governance, basically what it does is it really builds in strategic thinking abilities throughout the whole organization in a very systematic way, but without that, maybe it's not with that initial intention, but that's basically what does happen. But the other thing it does is it provides the freedom to continually get your role to be what you most want it to be and what the organization most needs. Because you are actually evolving your role by processing whatever tensions are coming up based on the work that you're doing today. So it's not kind of some theoretical activity. It's actually something literally is happening in this moment that we need to go ahead and create a new role for or actually change an accountability for. So I use the analogy of Lego because when I think about some of, and maybe this isn't 100% accurate for you guys, you know, but just to actually kind of share the concept, you know, in some organizations you have a job description, and so that's what it is, you know, and it stays that way for X amount of time. So it's kind of one big green Lego piece that we have. Whereas in Holacracy, you've got many roles that are little chunks of work. And so you might have a chunk that's 20% of your job, another 10, 5, and they all add together to be your 100%. But because they're actually these defined blocks, it's really easy to take a block and actually give it to somebody else. Because it's in this very transportable package, if you like. So instead of me keeping my role the way it is and continuing for whatever period of time makes sense, I can, on a month-to-month basis, really true up. Does that yellow block fit for me? You know, if I'm doing accounts payable and receivable, and I now need to go, well, I tell you what, payable makes sense, but receivable needs to go over here. And then that block gets split into two. And that doesn't wait for somebody else to actually come up with that solution. It's generated from the field. So how do you build your Lego heart job? That is ultimately the key for me there. I'm going to take just a couple of seconds here. You know, managers, the whole conversation about no managers. Managers have so many hats. Some of them might be in their area of incompetence or competence. So what Holacracy is saying is, let's actually take out that whole manager role and let's get clear on what are the roles. Is it developing? Is it coaching? Is it approving? Is it, you know, drafting contracts? You know, what is the actual work you're doing? Have that assigned to, you know, whoever it needs to be assigned to. And then when it comes to what we would call a lead link position, so basically no more overseers, it's people actually doing the work. But when it comes to an actual lead link position, which is what Holacracy utilizes for these 4 different types of work, allocating resources, prioritizing the work of the circle, assigning roles, and also determining what are the metrics that we need to use so that we know, you know, back to that question, how do you know that you've overemphasized or underemphasized? Well, are you hitting your metrics? Do you actually know what are the really metrics that matter? Those few numbers that you watch religiously, if you like, because they actually, when you see the metric, it will change your behavior. If a metric doesn't change your behavior, it's kind of more of a nice to know. It's not that important. So examples of metrics that matter, I'm going to move that out. And then we're looking at each circle is obviously going to have, Holacracy uses the circle structure. Each circle would have their own metrics, each circle would have their own lead link, And this is kind of what a structure might look like. There's what are we centralizing, what are we distributing? There still is a hierarchy at play, because there's circles within circles, so that you can cascade strategy, you can cascade resources, you can actually have those, you know, those controls in place that are needed. Yep. Any other thoughts or questions? Okay. Yeah.
Does Holacracy have a point of view on titles?
Yeah, so the point of view at this, well, the point of view is their titles don't exist within the structure, but the way that I've seen organizations resolve that is that, generally speaking, based on the roles you have a sense of, oh, what kind of level position is this? Is it director? Is it VP? Is it whatever? But that doesn't make any difference internally. The only time it really starts to make a difference is externally. So if you are presenting at a conference and you're the CEO, you might externally use that title. Or if somebody was, they're looking to apply for another job, they might say, well, yeah, my collection of roles adds up to VP. So that's normally how they use titles. It's more in an external sense rather than an internal sense. Yeah. So basically, what I would say is, this is really a way, for me, why I love it. It's about how do you get people towards genius? How do you get people to share their thoughts and tensions effectively? Because it's actually in service of the purpose. And when you tie that together, now my tensions, I can look at them and go, hold on a second, no, this one's a personal tension. It's for me to resolve. This one is an organizational tension because it's getting in the way of me delivering on the purpose. And it just creates such a different dynamic and such a different conversation. So I'm going to just flip to our final piece here. Because whenever you want to transform in any given way, it really is, are you willing to let go of some other aspect, some behavior, some approach? And that is what I love to look at is, am I willing, if I say I'm focused on transformation, am I really willing to let go of some of those things that are safe for me? So I really appreciate your time and attention. And I know you have lots that you will be doing this afternoon. So I will pause there and I will hand it back over to Karina. Thank you.